think we're set to go. Thanks everyone for staying on till the end of the day. I know it's been a long day, but very interesting day. I've had a really great day listening to all the presentations. I think I might name check a few because they've all been quite inspiring in their own ways, but a few of them have really spoken to me, and I've linked in with a couple of the things I think I might cover in my talk. I'm the Director of Learning and Teaching at the University of Hertfordshire. I've got a group of people, among whom are a bunch of learning and teaching specialists and educational technologists. So we work hand in hand together on staff development in the university, primarily for academic staff, but that does move into other areas as well, and there's some student development there as well. I have been involved in some kind of digital capability work, though personally, for quite a long time, and as I was asked to do this speech, I really just had this real sense of deja vu, and those of you who are Groundhog Day fans like me will know that feeling of waking up to Sonny and Cher going, I've done this, I don't know how many times. And what was interesting about Groundhog Day is, of course, Phil Connors wakes up to the same day every day. It's the same thing, same environment, and he changes and he turns into the person he wants to be. But for us, we don't wake up quite exactly to the same day. So although I've been here umpteen times before, it hasn't quite been the same. Things have changed. I started working on digital capabilities, and it wasn't called that then, in 2000, and a JISC project which was looking at ICT skills, as we called it, for students. I'm part of a project called Citscape with a group of universities, and we looked at students' ICT capabilities and creating a kind of baseline standard. And in fact, in my institution, we were one of a few institutions in the country who were brave enough to say, at that time, you will not graduate with your degree unless you also have your ICT skills certificate. Quite radical at the time, and something that didn't last that long, but that was what the institution decided was right at the time. In 2010, I moved much more into an environment. It's interesting, actually, when I was looking at what has changed, I was looking at the technology over the years at those points, and it doesn't look that different. But what struck me was, at the times when I got involved again in digital capabilities quite specifically, because you go off and do other things, then it surfaces again, suddenly it becomes the big thing again. And it became the big thing around 2000, it became the big thing again for me in 2010. It's becoming a big thing again, I think, much more, certainly in our institution now. It's this combination of a whole lot of technologies which are disruptive in a way which makes us all really panic again and think, oh goodness, we don't know what we're doing quite, do we? And the students, and you know, they're coming with this, and there's a sense of panic almost in the institution. So in 2010, the reason I was involved in it again was really because I was setting up online learning environments. In 2000, I think it was the dawn of Internet 1, and VLEs were just starting to come, and PCs were starting to appear all across the libraries. In 2010, everyone had PCs. We were much more mobile. The iPhone had just appeared, so touchscreen and mobile were beginning to come. We had Web 2.0, when we had a different web environment and things that were just different in terms of how we had to work. VLEs were everywhere, and what I was doing was actually developing online learning content. So it was becoming much more classroom blended, but much more online. And in 2018, now it's all consuming, and we were talking and we were doing a session, a workshop session with Laurie and Donna, and actually as I was sitting in it, I was thinking, gosh, I wish I'd done that before I actually had done their workshop in digital placement, digital leadership, before I started talking about this, because now it'll sound a bit silly, having just tried it on my own and not actually gone at a much more strategic level bottom up. But in 2018, it's not just the web, it's wearable technology, it's everything. It's not just, and in fact, I think the big change, it isn't anymore just keyboards and screens. It is something different. So that is the big change and the big disruption, and digital capabilities is something that we are dealing with again. A colleague of mine likened it to this, and she said it just feels like when we're in the university, we're one of these giant ships, and all these other little ships are running about, and they can whiz about and they can change, and we are turning, and it's taking us forever, and as soon as we've turned in one direction, it's time to turn back. And we're finding that's the difficulty at institutional level, at keeping digital capabilities on the agenda and keeping them high and keeping people feeling comfortable with how they feel in a digital world. What we did, therefore, initially at our institution, our digital capabilities working group was something that grew out of actually a review of our library and computing services, as it's called now, but it was called Office of Chief Information Officer. And we put together, as part of that review, one of the outputs, one of the recommendations, was to look at staff and student digital capabilities and take that forward in some way going into the next few years. So that review was about 2 years ago, and we put together a digital capabilities scoping group, and it was made up of a whole combination of people, and it was something that we hadn't done at our institution in Hertfordshire before. It was made up of academic staff, it was made up of professional staff as well, as we felt digital capabilities wasn't just about the learning and teaching, it was something broader. It was made up of a number of students, and the key staff development areas where digital capabilities was being delivered, because it is happening, it's not something that we don't do. We do have courses and programs and all sorts of things where we're doing all sorts of different things, and those courses are coming from my team in the learning and teaching arena, they're coming from our library and computing services, from our finance office, our academic registry. They're all doing something that contributes to digital capabilities in some way. So it was important to have everybody in that group. And actually my remit at this time, as I chaired the group, was pretty small, was to say, should we have baseline digital capabilities for different types of staff, and should we have baseline digital capabilities for students? And then that was it. I thought I'll just come out with recommendations and then someone else will take that forward. So we did the workshops, we reviewed various frameworks, profiles. It just so happened the digital capability tool at that time had just been launched, so we used that, we reviewed that. We looked at what we were currently doing, and we were one of the institutional case studies then in that first development of the tool. We did a lot of engagement, but it was all very voluntary. We did not go round and systematically force anyone to take part in this pilot. We just said, use the tool, it's part of what we're doing. It was raising awareness of digital capabilities at that time. If you're interested, do it, try it, and let's see what it brings out as an institution. So we did that. It was all quite informal. I'm not going to go into the results, but obviously we got them. And for us as an institution, the main output was not at the individual level, really, to be fair. It was much more at where do we see we've currently got some gaps and issues, and as an institution feeling the pulse of where are we now in terms of how staff feel. And the top line was really where our teaching staff mostly felt they had gaps, and the purple area below is where our professional staff indicated they had gaps. So it gave us a sense of what we weren't doing very well, given that we were doing a lot of stuff, and what we could do better. But it also allowed us to say, what are we going to do taking digital capabilities forward? And we essentially came out of that working group saying, let's use the digital capabilities framework, discovery tool. It's not perfect. It's maybe not the best one, but it's there. We're feeding into the development of that. So JISC are listening to us as we participate. They're refining the tool. Eventually, it will be customizable, we hope, to the extent that we'd like it to be a bit more customizable. And let's continue to use it. But knowing that it was not really what we were doing was setting a baseline. So it was how can we use it, but how can we not use it in a way that everyone thinks it's about setting a baseline. I've said that, but I'm going to contradict myself later on in the talk, because there is a bit of tension and difficulty, I think, around that, and people getting the wrong idea or the right idea about what a tool like this can do. So we had that recommendation, and I thought, that's great, I've done my job. Someone else can actually do the difficult part of carrying that forward. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out like that. So we had phase 2, and I was asked to chair the steering group for phase 2. So we have a steering group which is looking at the whole project across the institution, and we look at steering what's going on plus the communication strategy. We then broke down what we were going to do into 3, and we said we're going to actually separate out digital capabilities for academics, staff as a group, for professional staff as a group, and that's a huge group, as you know. So we've got, by professional staff, it means everyone else, effectively. And that ranges from from admin staff, the library computing service staff, e-learning technologists, the finance staff, you name it, they're all in that giant group, and that is the biggest range of difference, if you like, in capabilities that we've got. And then there was also a group which we were going to specifically, again, look at students and what they were going to do in terms of digital capabilities. For the next bit of my talk, I'm going to really concentrate mostly on the academic staff part. I chair the academic staff working group. 2 others chair the professional staff group. Someone from HR, our people development team, chairs that. The student group is chaired by one of our professors in e-learning and National Teaching Fellows, and she's looking after the student part. And I'll talk briefly about what they're doing. I'm going to talk about now, because I only have time to talk about one area really, about what our approach is now going forward, having said we need to use this digital capability tool from JISC somehow, and what we currently do, because again, we currently do things, and we're currently putting new programs together all the time and thinking about what it is to be an academic within our institutions. So that's what I'm going to talk about mainly. I'll touch on the other 2. So in phase 2, we've got 10 academic schools in the university. 5 of them have signed up to do an extended pilot with us using the JISC digital capabilities discovery tool. But they don't all want to do it the same way, of course, and that is great, because that's what we also want. We don't think there's one way to suit everyone in this. And we've got schools, we've got the School of Physics, Astronomy, Maths, and we've got the School of Law, and we've got the Business School. They've all got different needs, requirements, things that they want to be able to do, and how they teach and learn and so on, and how they use their own digital capabilities. But what they did want was a framework for carrying out the pilot. So we put together a framework which is adaptable. So this is not set in stone. This is all editable and all adaptable, but it has those 4 stages where we want people to sign up. So we want to sell the idea of why digital capabilities is good. We want to explain what it's about. We want to have people understanding that it isn't about looking at their gaps or deficiencies. It's about development, and it's also about where we are good at things and where we can develop that and share that. So it's about what is this, what is it about. We then want them to use the tool, but again, the schools are looking at how they can use that within their own context, most specifically for their context. So in some cases it will be voluntary, in some cases in the business school, for example, they've identified subject groups, and those subject groups will come together in a room and they will complete the tool together as a staff development exercise, and they will discuss how they felt using the tool, and they'll discuss, and they have actually discussed how they felt using the tool, and they'll talk about what it means for them as a subject group in terms of development going forward and so on. So they're doing it as a group development process. Another school is doing it purely on a voluntary basis and asking the individuals to take the output of that tool to their next appraisal meeting and discuss it with their line manager and work out what that means for them as an individual and how they want to go forward. But that is purely voluntary, and there is no compulsion on anyone to sign up to that. In other schools, they purely want to do what we did in the first pilot, which is have a sense across the whole school of where there are current strengths and weaknesses as a whole for the whole department, and then look at how they can tailor staff development going forward. So we're allowing that within the discovery phase and the development opportunity review phase. So together, the schools work out what they want to do, and they identify that in that framework that we've got. This is how we are going to conduct this pilot. We then are doing a feedback session. So feedback is not at all about what's your digital capability and what are you going to do about it. The feedback is all about how was that process of going through discovering about your digital capabilities in the context of your learning and teaching, and how then we take that forward to help you develop. So did you find it useful? Would you find it useful? What would have been a better way for us to work with it? How do you think we can integrate it into practice? So the feedback is about the pilot and the process. It's not about the tools. And we're just moving into that phase now and how we'll collate the feedback. Mostly it's going to be done by focus group. Some schools want to have it done through surveys and other things as well. Now, as I said, that's happening, but remember, we're already doing a bunch of stuff. And about 18 months ago, my team, because I said to you, we've got the learning and teaching specialists in our team, we're responsible for the PG Cert in learning and teaching, the CPD framework, and all the CPD staff development around learning and teaching. We put together, as I said we do, we put together a nice little booklet which outlines how we do that in our institution and what that looks like for staff. And again, it's an interesting way of just reflecting a lot of stuff that goes on, but putting it down in a nice, simple way that people can understand. So our practice, we call it an entitlement as well as an expectation. So yes, there is a necessity, if you're a new member of staff, to go through probation and do some development and get your PG cert and become a fellow of the Higher Education Academy. But there's that sense also that this is actually great stuff. What we're doing is really good. We're giving you development and we're actually helping you become a better teacher. We're progressing your career and we're trying to support you in what you want to do and how you want to do that. So of course, based around CPD actions and based around appraisal, but it is also this idea that CPD is lifelong, it changes, it comes in all sorts of different forms. It can be school-led, it can be business-led. The school says we need to improve our assessment and feedback. We need to do something about how we use assessment and feedback better with our students and so on. So development might come in that way. It might come through my own reflection on my practice, through peer observation, all sorts of other things. And there's all sorts of triggers which will identify what my personal actions are when I have that discussion with my line manager. But we then try to articulate that into much more of a pathway for people so they're aware of the actual offerings, if you like, that are there and the things that we would expect you to do even around that conversation as part of your appraisal. So we've modelled what CPD looks like at different stages. So the purple area is if you are brand new to teaching, brand new into higher education, you're feeling quite a novice and quite unsure, and we'll take you through a very structured CPD model for the first 2 years of your career, and it will involve a whole lot of other things you can see there in detail, and this is all in the book. The next one, the green one, is for staff who are not new to teaching in higher education. They've taught elsewhere, but they're new to University of Hertfordshire, and it's about inducting them into our way of doing things and our VLE and how we teach and what our classrooms are like and what we expect and what this subject looks like in University of Hertfordshire. And then the others are for staff at other stages of the career, 3 to 6 years and 6 years plus. And alongside that, we've introduced what we call learning landscapes. So again, recognising that although we've got the structured programme and we expect you to go through it, we've actually incorporated into those programmes what we think your CPD conversations could look like and where you're learning over and above that structure, or where that structure fits in to this type of way of learning. So what we've got, again, are learning landscapes for the different stages. We say you're learning all the time from activities that you do, from colleagues, you're learning from students, you're learning from literature, and we've populated around the outside ideas of what that might look like at different stages of your career and what it is you're trying to work towards. So we've mapped all of this to the UK Professional Standards Framework, the HEA qualifications, so that again we're meeting the objectives of that framework so that you know as you're working through these various types of CPD, you are also going to be working towards fellowship, senior fellowship and so on with the HEA. So the challenge for us is, how do we do that? Because we're doing all this good stuff, and then how do we integrate this? If we're asking people to get their digital capabilities outputs and also add that into this mix, how do we do it? And how do we make that understandable? And how is it meaningful for staff to be able to now add another layer, another issue that they're trying to think about into this framework that we had spent so long and so proud of having developed? So that's our challenge going forward. Of course, that's not the only thing that's happening. Also, it just so happens, we are currently going through installing a new VLE in the institution. So we've got a massive staff development conundrum problem in that, as well as the normal life that goes on, we are also installing a new VLE, and we're moving from a bespoke system to the first time the institution has ever bought something from a vendor. So we're moving from our StudyNet to Canvas, and we're also, at the same time, installing Talus, a reading list software. So we're doing a massive staff development around how do we move everything that used to be on one VLE to another. We didn't do this in a way that we could just take everything from one VLE and plonk it into the other. We actually put it on the back of a new pedagogical approach within the university that we wanted everyone to follow. And the pedagogical approach is not a set of templates that you fill in, it's a set of principles that your online sites should follow. So they're high-level principles, they're called Guided Learner Journey Principles, and we want to see those principles embedded within the VLE at all the modules that the students will actually interact with. And that can look different actually, but the principles can still be embedded. So we had a real challenge of embedding the principles, embedding the pedagogy in the new technology and moving staff. So we developed this, what we call training wheel. At the centre of it there is an online training module which actually is in the VLE, models the guided learner journey, shows the good practice, talks about how you put your module sites together in the guided learner journey format and so on, and that can be accessed by anyone at any time. We obviously continued to do what you would call standard training, I suppose, so introductions, workshops on the guided learner journey, the pedagogic principles, how that is then created in an initial structure within your module sites, and the introduction to reading lists and how you use those and embed those reading lists throughout the learning journey. But then we also decided that that was still not quite enough in terms of what we wanted to do. So what we really worked on is a lot more use of one-to-one, of student mentors. So Jenny earlier from LSE was speaking about the use of student STAs in doing staff development. We've used student mentors extensively in staff development. And they will sit with staff on one-to-one, they will take part in the workshops. So our workshops are usually maybe 5 or 6 members of staff, mostly students, one member of staff, academic or professional member of training staff, 5 or 6 students, and probably about 20 to 30 members of staff. So quite heavily staff-student ratio. And then we have student mentors who will literally go out into the office and sit with a member of staff if they want that and work with them on a particularly tricky issue that they want to solve. And what has been really successful is our office walks, and we have a team of people. We have an information manager, we have our training coordinator, our main training coordinators who are doing the training for Canvas and Talus. We have a student mentor, and we have our learning and teaching specialist, a learning and teaching person. And they go in a group of 4, and they go into a school, and they literally walk around the corridors, knock on the doors. How are you? Is everything all right? Are you working on your modules? Do you need any help? And it's amazing how many members of staff stop and say, oh, I've actually got a problem with this, and can you show me how to do X? And that has been one of the most successful ways of actually getting that training embedded in context, some just by absolute serendipity, but not quite planned on our part. Then we've got master classes and various things, and amazingly, the master classes are fully subscribed, oversubscribed, and that's on a voluntary basis. So the ones in orange are mandatory for every member of staff. Master classes are voluntary. This has been great. I have to say, one of the great things about the student mentors has been the feedback from staff about how brilliant they are, and the students talk about their learning and what they're doing in their module, what a member of staff is doing in their module site, how that feels to the students, and how that could be better if you're in my shoes. Actually, if you did this, you'd find that would be better for the students, or have you thought about that? So there's a lot of really good supportive work going on with the students and the student mentors. And in fact, one of the deans from one of our schools doesn't want trained by anyone else other than students in future. Finds them much more. At the same time, we've got other bits and pieces going on bottom up. What we're trying to do now, and this is where we're having some real problems, is actually taking then, I said to you, all our CPD maps the UK Professional Standard Framework into what we do. What we're trying to do is take some of the things that are in the digital capabilities profiles and map these into the training that we do and the training that we currently deliver, especially around our online training module on the guided learner journey. Not to badge anyone or not to say you're competent in any of these areas, but more just to thread what's there and weave it into what's happening and make it invisible almost, so that staff don't feel it's another thing to do. they need to know they're doing this and they're developing and that these things are happening, but that maybe they haven't quite noticed it. So this is our challenge at the minute, and this is what we're trying to do, is take the challenge of, for example, rolling out a VLE and seeing how we can make that make sense and make people aware that what they're doing is developing capabilities in these ways, without making it overt, making it something that they value at least. I think this is an old version of slides because I had another couple of slides. So anyway, we're running out of time, so it's an appropriate place to stop. I'm not going to talk therefore at all about the professional staff development or the student development, other than to say professional staff routes are taking a slightly different route, and they are actually trying to map the digital capabilities framework or our outcomes to job descriptions. We have generic job descriptions for certain roles, and they are actually looking at taking some of the digital capabilities that come out of the framework and embedding them into job descriptions, and then again looking at how we can support staff in developing those, because we find they think they're crucial for that particular role, for those particular digital capabilities to be developed in a way that's actually helpful for the members of staff. So it's a bit more formal, it's a bit more driven by this idea that we do require a certain skill level within that group of staff. I don't necessarily think it's right, but that's what that group is looking at the minute, and we'll come back to the bigger scoping group, the bigger steering group, and discuss that. The student one is taking a different route again, and we're looking at the digital student tracker. We're not looking at the digital capability student bit of the digital capability tool. We're looking at student tracker instead, and we've got students engaged with that, and we've got them looking at how they feel about being in the digital world, and how what we are providing is helping them develop as individuals and what they'd like to develop further in, and how we can help them do that. So it's a much more, bit more of a dialogue with the students, and a bit more of a partnership around how we can help them develop in their own context, and how what we do as an institution, how we can support that. Moving away from that idea of there's a baseline for students and it's this and you've all got to achieve it, which I think 18 years ago was something that was very much the vogue. I would say anything to add to that, what I've also learned is this is blooming hard. I don't think it's got any easier, I think it's got harder. I think what we're trying to do with digital capabilities might feel like it's the same, that we wake up to it again every so often and think, oh gosh, we have to get on with it. But I think it just gets harder and harder to deal with it, and it's more complicated to deal with. But it's something that for us, as an institution, has allowed us to have really deep conversations. There's a lot of fear has been surfaced in certain areas. We've had unions coming in saying this is all about us, people getting fired if they can't, show that they've got these capabilities. Huge lot of fear, huge lot of anxiety around it, huge lot of people worried about admitting what they know or don't know. And it's very hard for us to take this approach, which is all about entitlement and development and trying to be helpful and trying to say this isn't about finding fault, it's about improving what we can do for you as an individual in the organisation, hence help the organisation. And what else have I learned? Well, one day I hope I wake up and I don't hear Sunny and Cher on the radio, and then I definitely will have cracked it. Okay, thank you.